All right, so this is Mrs. Berklet, and we're going to talk about for U.S. History class, Westward expansion. We started talking about this a little bit today at the end of class, and so we're going to go in a little bit more detail. If you could watch this by tomorrow, Wednesday, that would be awesome, but for sure have this watched by Thursday. All right, so Westward expansion, here we go. So the area that we're talking about really with the Louisiana Purchase is this area in purple. And again, you should have this shared in your drive, so you should be able to take a look at this simultaneously as you're watching this video. But really before or after the signing of the Constitution and before 1803, this was the United States. After 1803, when the Louisiana Purchase was made, this is what we gain in the expansion. And really, we're going to take a look at how this movement of land and this gaining of land causes a civil war, because it's going to play a huge part in making the Civil War happen, and what are we going to do about it? How's it going to work out? All right. So the Louisiana Purchase, like I said, was in 1803. This was land that was acquired from France by the United States. We got, what did I say here? All the lands west of the Mississippi, about 100,000 square miles. That's more than doubling the size of the United States of what it was at that time, to 1803. We get it for $15 million, which isn't a lot even at that time. So we're talking like a pretty good deal that we got for the Louisiana area. But the problem that comes with this really great deal is, what are we going to do about free or slave states? And we're going to talk about that. After the Louisiana Purchase was made, you may recall this from Washington State history, but Lewis and Clark explored the area under Jefferson. Jefferson. And Jefferson encourages people after Lewis and Clark returned to move west, and there was a big, huge land movement, and that's really how Washington got here. So you should already know that from Washington State history. Hopefully you passed. Okay, so this is kind of a map of westward expansion, and we can kind of see this. Again, you have this on your PowerPoint in your drive, but you can see the years when these things, when these states were made. So you can kind of see that as we move west, we're gaining this territory. And this map is going to come in handy as we kind of take a look at when states are made, what the issues are, and all that good stuff. So you can kind of see here is the Louisiana Purchase in the middle, the Texas annexation when Texas leaves Mexico and becomes part of the United States. We get the Oregon country where Oregon Trail stuff, you may have played that game before, so Oregon Trail is in there, and then Mexican secession, and Mexican secession is the lands that the United States gains after the Mexican-American War, which we will talk about. All right, the cotton gin. How do these two things connect? Well, it's going to make a lot of sense here in a little bit. The cotton gin comes about in 1794. An inventor by the name of Eli Whitney invents and patents this invention, this cotton gin. What it pretty much does is it separates seeds from the cotton kind of fluff. Not really what we would think may be a big deal now, but if we're talking about labor-intensive crop that is cotton, we're moving from one man taking 10 hours, I think it says one slave taking 10 hours to produce 1 pound of cotton, to a team of 2 to 3 slaves can produce 50 pounds of cotton in a day. It makes cotton way more profitable, and I'm going to go back. Don't worry, I'll go forward. And cotton is really growing in this part of the United States. It needs a warm climate, it's dry weather crop, and it needs a lot of land and a lot of people to work it. Because while the separating of cotton from the seeds isn't that labor intensive, for you to make a profit, think about a cotton ball, it's not very heavy. So for you to make a profit, you better be growing lots of cotton and harvesting lots of cotton. So again, we see cotton production expands. We go from about 750,000 bales of hay in 1830 to 2.85 million bales of hay just 20 years later. So cotton is kind of growing and booming. One group of people that is going to work the cotton fields is going to be slaves. Going back again, this area down here becomes slave states, and a lot of the slaves are working in those cotton fields. Because again, you need a large amount of cotton to make a profit, because it's not really heavy, and you're going to have to grow pounds and pounds of it, so you're going to need lots and lots of people to work the land. And the southern states saw that cheap labor was slaves. In fact, slave culture and slavery in America was on the decline until the cotton gin gets invented, and then all of a sudden we see a huge boom of slavery in southern states, with, I believe, Mississippi having more slave population than white population at one time before the Civil War. All right, so what's the problem here? Okay, we can probably make some predictions and think about what the problem might be. Increased number of slaves. Maybe there's going to be an issue between slavery and free states. Who knows? But the new states that are entering the United States have to have a decision made. Are they going to be free states or are they going to be slave states? Cotton in the South is profitable, and most states at this time in the North have outlawed slavery. Massachusetts, while it had slavery at the time of the Revolution, by this time in the 1850s, or 1840s, 1850s, slavery was unnecessary in many northern states, and they had actually outlawed it with their state constitutions. Prior to the admission of Missouri, there were equal number of slave and free states. There was 11 free and 11 slave, which we know from our Constitution unit, or you should know from your Constitution unit, that each state has 2 senators, so they had equal number of senators in the House. So there was 22 slave state senators and 22 free state senators, while the House of Representatives may be proportioned by population. That Senate is going to be equal, which is going to come into play when we talk about the Compromise of 1850 and the Missouri Compromise. All right, so problem. What happens if we allow a new state that's either free or slave? It's going to upset the balance in the Senate. One group is going to have more power than the other. And so that could be a problem, or will be a problem. All right, so we get the Missouri Compromise. So the first of 2 major compromises that we're going to look at in causes of the American Civil War. We're going to read about the Missouri Compromise. We're going to read an excerpt about the Missouri Compromise. So if your pins and needles excited about how awesome this is. The Missouri Compromise says, Missouri is going to be admitted as a slave state, and Maine, which was not a state until 1820, is going to be admitted as a free state. They just take the northern part of Massachusetts, chop it off, call it Maine. And they're going to have a line, a 3630 line that's going to be established, saying that anything below the 3630 can be a slave state, and anything above it has to be a free state. So they're going to create this kind of arbitrary line right there. And we're going to look at it on this map. So here we kind of see this. This is the map of the Missouri Compromise. You can kind of see the areas. While it's not states yet, it's unorganized territories. This can only be free if they're going to be slave, or if they're going to be admitted as states. And everything below this is going to be slave, whether they want to or not. Going to be another problem. We see here Missouri is entered as a slave state, and Maine is entered as a free state. All right, so we have another problem. Let's go back. Sorry. As we move west, people are moving west, we're going to see more U.S. citizens kind of entering into these territories, and there's going to be problems. We're going to have the Mexican-American War as American citizens come in here and want to establish this as a U.S. states. So we get the Mexican-American War. The Missouri Compromise really works until that Mexican-American War is won by the United States. And we now have more areas of the U.S. that are going to be entered, and what do we do with them? Free state, slave state, big problem again. Going back to the Missouri Compromise, we have all these states that are below it would be slave states. All these states above it would be free states. All right, so it would make sense. We're just going to make free states and slave states. Well, we have a problem. With the Mexican secession, and again, that's the idea that a territory is given to another, like one country gives land to another country. Mexico loses the war. They give land to the United States. We get Texas, New Mexico, and California are all entered into the United States. Well, we have this guy, Wilmot, whatever his first name is, let's call him John. John Wilmot comes in and says, hey, we're going to make a law that says, or a bill, prohibiting slavery in any of the lands gained by the Mexican secession. You can probably guess that this guy, Wilmot, is a northerner. He is a free state guy. He wants to see free states gaining more power in the South, or in the Senate. And so it goes through the House of Representatives, which it passes, which makes sense. The North has more population than the South, so they're going to have more representatives in the House of Representatives. But because there's 2 per state, and now we're looking at 12 free states, 12 slave states, it dies in the Senate because it can't get enough votes to pass. Well, at the same time that this is going on, in 1849, we discover gold in California. California is booming, and it's rich, and it's wealthy, but the people in California do not want to be a slave state. They would like to be a free state. So in their state constitution, because they need to, for an area to become a state, it has to have a certain amount of people and can produce a certain amount of tax revenue for the national government, and California did it like that. they are the fastest state to go from territory to state in the United States. So it's kind of a big deal. They got a lot of gold. They're going to make a lot of tax revenue for the national government. The national government really, really, really wants California in. California makes a state constitution that says we're free. We're not going to have slaves in our state. So they kind of look at, if we go back to the, Missouri Compromise, this line, this 3630 line, would cut California in half. And because it's below, it would have to be a slave state. Well, the United States government doesn't want to lose California. Where am I going? Haha. Okay, they don't want to lose California, so they allow California to be admitted as a free state, which totally blows up the whole Missouri Compromise. It's no longer really relevant, because if you're letting California be free, then why not let another state be slave, or all that other stuff. So, we get another compromise, because the United States is all about compromise. So we get the Compromise of 1850. And the Compromise of 1850 has 4 really important key things. 1, it allows California to be a free state. California comes in, their constitution stands, they're a free state. 2, in the rest of the new lands acquired by Mexico, or the Mexican territory, they would be allowed to be determine if they're going to be free or slave based on vote, based on popular sovereignty, what the people in that area want to become. 3, they're going to abolish slave trade in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., which many people in the North said it's kind of embarrassing that our nation's capital, where everybody in the world can watch, all of a sudden is having like slave auctions in the street. Maybe not that good, so let's just abolish slavery in Washington, D.C. The South said, oh, okay. And we get the new fugitive slave laws. We're going to talk about that in class. It's in the reading that you received on Tuesday, so you can kind of take a look at that, but they're much stricter. Federal marshals are now more involved in the slave catching or slave capture. If you are an African American in the North, even if you're free, you'd have to produce papers to show that you were not a runaway slave before a runaway slave could get to the North. And if they were in the North, then they were kind of free. But now under the new, stronger fugitive slave laws, they're actually captured and returned back. So you have another problem here. This is not going to set well with either side. Neither side, free or slave, is going to be really jazzed about having this compromise, especially the North. They're not going to like this piece at all. They're going to hate it, because now they're going to feel like, hey, we're involved in slavery and we don't like it. So we're going to see more problems coming out of the Compromise of 1850, because eventually in 1860 we go to war. So we're going to have problems, even though they thought, hey, we fixed it, it doesn't get fixed. All right, so there we go. Here is another map, which may be hard to see on the video. Good thing you got it on your drive, of where the new territories are. They reorganized some things. These states could become slave or free. So Texas chooses to be a slave state. And if you look closely, and this is going to help you with your map activity on Wednesday, you can see percentage of slave, or percent of the population that was slave. And I was wrong. It wasn't Mississippi. It's South Carolina that has 57.5% of its population as slave in 1850. So 10 years before the Civil War, more people that live in South Carolina are slaves than they are free. That's kind of crazy. All right. Utah, New Mexico territory, all these territories under the the Compromise of 1850 would get to choose if they want to be free or slave if they get enough people and enough revenue. California becomes a free state. And that is it. So tomorrow we'll talk about, or Wednesday, we'll talk about our map activity. Thursday, definitely have this video watched by then. All right, have a great afternoon.